Welcome. Thank you for being with us tonight. Before I introduce my guests, I'd like to welcome all of you to CMHRC's webinar series. And I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Errico, and I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Mental Health Resource Center. For those of you who are new to CMHRC, we are a nonprofit charity organization that provides guidance and resources for the early identification and management of mood disorders, bipolar disorder, and its newly identified phenotype, dubbed fear of harm, or FOH for short. These disorders are isolating for children and families and are complicated for providers to treat. So, we at CMHRC are here to break down that isolation and provide the support everyone needs to ensure children get an accurate diagnosis and treatment that works. To fulfill this mission, we provide a multitude of services for families as well as practitioners and educators, from diagnostic consultation for families and providers to help ensure an accurate diagnosis, to school advocacy to provide information on the impact of mental health challenges at school and in the classroom, community advocacy, access to our CMHRC toolkit, which we are very proud of. It is a web app that tracks symptom intensity and frequency, medication history and compliance, mood tracking, diagnosis history, and more. All of these are available to both families as well as providers, and we have special membership programs for each group. You can learn more about our programs and services on our website, cmhrc.org. And if you're interested in any of them, you can email us directly through the Contact Us page or make an appointment for a free consultation directly from any of our website's pages that outline our services. Lastly, as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization, and we're able to provide these many services and programs to families and practitioners and educators only because of the generosity of our community of donors. From the $10 contributed by a grateful 12-year-old and his 9-year-old sister, to major gifts from individuals and institutional donors. Each and every gift matters and supports our essential work with children and families, mental health providers, and schools. Throughout October and November, we are running a fundraiser, which we call the Giving Thanks campaign. So if you appreciate the programs and services we offer, like this free webinar tonight, we invite you to join CMHRC in celebrating gratitude and in giving hope. We extend a heartfelt thank you to our generous donors for making our mission a reality. So I'm excited tonight to be speaking with Jan Ellison Baszucki, the co-founder of Metabolic Mind, an organization she founded with her husband, David. Its mission is to provide education and resources in the emerging field of metabolic psychiatry, which includes ketogenic interventions. Also with us is her son, Matt Baszucki, who is a speaker and an advocate. Matt and Jan have publicly shared the story of how bipolar disorder emerged for Matt and the 5 years it took to find effective treatment. What strikes me is that although the details are unique to Matt's story, the themes are the same ones we hear over and over again from families everywhere. So, Jan and Matt, you've said that it was a nearly 5-year period of trying lots of different medications, seeing many different healthcare professionals. Could you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
He was prescribed a total of 29 different medications over the course of that 5-year period and treated by more than 40 healthcare professionals, mental health care professionals, including the ones in residential treatment centers all over the country. We tried a lot of other things too. I dragged Matt down a lot of dead ends, honestly. Orthomolecular medicine, a compound pharmacy made a custom supplement protocol, which maybe helped a little. Some things that helped a little bit, other diets, paleo diet, went gluten-free, went dairy-free, tried RTMS, so transcranial magnetic stimulation, which helped, I think, a little bit with depression, but didn't provide lasting stability. What else did we try? You name it, we tried it. And then I happened to meet somebody, my husband and I happened to get on a Zoom with someone he was actually raising money for mental health startups. And he told us his story. And his story was that he had struggled with bipolar 1 with psychotic features his whole life. He also had issues with addiction, and he had gained 100 pounds or something from his psychiatric medications. He went on a ketogenic diet and he lost 100 pounds. His lifelong bipolar symptoms started to resolve, and he kicked his addictions. And I was like, whoa, what? And I had known about the ketogenic diet, but I had never heard about its use in psychiatry before. And then we were introduced to the work of Dr. Chris Palmer, whose book, Brain Energy, came out last year. At the time we learned about Dr. Palmer's work, there was no book, but he had a website, and I read the articles on his website. And I mentioned it to Matt, just kind of, I was a little bit nervous introducing him to yet another intervention that I was sure was going to work. But he was game. He was like, I maybe want to talk about that. What happened when we finally found out that this might be an option, and how you felt and what your reaction was.
Sure. So, like I said, I had really been through the ringer from 2016 to 2018. I had horrific type 1 bipolar disorder, mania with psychotic features, in and out of horrific hallucinations, in and out of the psych ward, prescribed olanzapine and all the other medications you can imagine. And even when I started to get a little bit better in 2018, and like my mom said, I was doing everything correctly, ostensibly everything, exercising regularly, tracking my sleep. And the pattern was that my sleep would start to decrease over successive nights, and I would have to take additional olanzapine to have a longer sleep and prevent my mood from elevating and going into mania. And so I was doing everything right, but I still couldn't manage my mood. The momentum of my illness just wanted to make me manic, and it was really, really hard. Relationships were hard. School was challenging. And so Mom found Dr. Palmer's work and the ketogenic diet in 2020. I knew that I had been taking care of most of the components of the wellness program meticulously and consistently and well, but I knew that diet was another piece of the puzzle that I hadn't quite figured out. I didn't know what I was supposed to be eating, to be honest. And so we found the keto diet. I went on the keto diet on January 4th of 2021 under the supervision of Dr. Palmer, as well as a dietitian. And I started tracking my ketones regularly, and it was a game changer, absolute game changer. Without keto, there's no way I'd be where I am today. And people see me do a lot of things consistently, wellness related things like exercise, good sleep, get sunlight in the morning, good relationships, community, etc. But keto was the answer. Without keto, I would be nowhere. Within a few months, I saw my manic symptoms virtually disapparate. I went through that March, which is when we like to call it March Madness, because a lot of patients have mania in March as the days are becoming longer very rapidly. And in previous years, I'd had to take upwards of 20 milligrams of Zyprexa a day, olanzapine a day or more to prevent my mood from becoming manic. And in 2021, that March, I went through the March on 5 milligrams of olanzapine a day, every single day. I didn't have to up the dose. My sleep was consistent. I watched myself sleep 8 hours every day like clockwork straight through March, and that has not changed. I watched my brain come back, my cognitive function come back, my executive functioning come back. And, since I started that diet almost 3 years ago, I have not had a manic episode. I've had tiny, tiny little blips here and there that always resolve themselves. I never have to go to the psych ward. It's always just a day or two. But it's been completely life-changing.
So, Matt, I have to say that it really is quite remarkable that after so many attempts of following the rules that you were told to follow and having them not work for you, that when presented with yet another thing, that you were ready, willing, and able to try it. A lot of young adults in particular get to a point where they sort of throw up their hands and they say, well, nothing's worked. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Well, what do you think it was for you that allowed you to push forward and try that next thing, which turned out to be the right thing?
That's a great question. I had mom helping me, number one, and I have a tenacious spirit. I always have. And I knew that if I didn't try everything, obviously I was going to regret it, but the suffering of the illness was so terrible when I was in the midst of it. And even then, my life was very challenging through 2020 before I started the diet, even though I was somewhat managing, but anything that could play a part, I was game. And I had the attitude that I want to beat this thing and I don't want to let it run my life. And I saw what the rest of my life would look like if I didn't get well and if I didn't heal. And maybe I would continue to take medication that causes terrible brain fog and side effects and metabolic dysfunction for the rest of my life. That didn't sound like an appealing option. And I knew that if I kept living like that under the blanket of these heavy duty psychiatric meds, it's not really life. It really wasn't for me. And I desperately wanted my life back. And also I had experimented with life hacks in the past, and it's not something I was new to. I've always experimented with different ways to live, sleep schedules, diets. I've tried different things. So, I was totally ready to do it. I hadn't given up yet at that point.
And it sounds like it also speaks to those relationships that you said, were a part of your sort of more comprehensive lifestyle intervention, sort of treatment planning, was having relationships with people that you trust, who you would be interested in hearing from, wanted feedback from, wanted support from. And it sounds like your mom was a huge part of that. Jan, can you talk a little bit from the parents' perspective as to what it was like to know that you wanted to find solutions for Matt and to come across ones that didn't work, and then ultimately to find one that did?
Yes, I can speak to that. To be honest, there were 5 extremely difficult years. We have 3 younger daughters. Matt is the eldest of our 4 children. And so they were in high school and elementary school, and Matt got sick. And I pretty much dropped everything to focus on this in a rather obsessive way. And I got a lot of, I think, probably very good advice, which was, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Put your oxygen mask on first. Accept that this is Matt's life, and it's going to involve a lifetime of, as Matt said, these very heavy duty medications that were keeping him from being in hospital, but were not giving him his life back. And I pretty much systematically ignored all of that advice. So I treated it like a sprint. I got very, very deep in the research. I did not accept, even when he got the diagnosis of treatment resistance, which, I will just share that I don't think that anybody should ever get a diagnosis of treatment resistant anything, not bipolar disorder and not anything else, because what does that make you do? It makes you feel like, I felt like Matt and I had failed. We had been working so hard for all these years. He had been doing everything he could. I was doing everything I could. His dad was doing everything he could. And it was like, oh, you're treatment resistant. No, you're not treatment resistant. The interventions that were being offered were not the right interventions. So it was the treatment that failed. It was not the family, and it was not Matt. And I think that's really important to remember. Just reject that. If someone tells you you're treatment resistant, it has no meaning. And it was just that we hadn't found the right thing yet. And once we finally did, it just became clear that there are answers out there. We are starting to understand brain disorders like bipolar disorder as metabolic dysfunctions that are affecting the brain. It might not be for everybody, but I believe it is most mental illnesses will boil down to metabolism. And there are many things we can do to repair and heal metabolism. And so once Matt started to get better, I mean, I always say I kept doubting that this could possibly be what had worked. Something so simple. Literally, this diet, this intervention is a tweet. Restrict carbohydrates, or intermittent fast, or exercise a whole bunch until your liver produces ketones. That's the diet. That's the intervention. It's so elegant and simple. And yet it's working, we know now, on like 20 different pathways in the body and the brain. So it's a very profound metabolic shift that your body goes through and that your brain goes through. And so it kind of all makes sense, but it just felt impossible as well, that this something so simple could be literally healing what we were told was going to be a chronic lifetime mental illness.
I love what you said, and I really want to underscore it and amplify it. So often in psychiatry, the language that is used to describe the treatment process, especially for kids, is that there's a protocol of, we're going to try this med and then this med and then this med. And when the medication doesn't work, what we say is that the child failed on that medication. And that is backwards. The child didn't fail. The medication failed to do what it was employed to do, plain and simple. Yet there is this language of blame that is put onto the family, onto the patient, that really just doesn't belong. So thank you for saying that. We have a couple of questions coming in. One question is for Matt. Did you remain compliant on your medications when you began the diet? And if so, at what point did you start making adjustments to your medications in relation to how well the diet was working?
Great question. Kept all the medications exactly the same when I started the diet. Came off of benzodiazepine that year after it had been 3 years of tapering that terrible, sick medication. I finally got off it. Started on Ativan, cross-tapered to Valium, got a compound pharmacy to prescribe us 0.1 milligram increment pills, I believe it was. Finally got off of it. Came down Zyprexa to 2.5 milligrams a day, which is where I'm at now, and planning to continue that taper until I'm off it. Very, very slowly, methodically started to taper off these meds, and I'm hoping to be off all of them in about under 2 years. Would be amazing. But no, I did not start keto and then just get rid of all my meds in 3 weeks. And we don't advise that people do that.
There's a real eagerness sometimes to be able to stop taking the medications, but it sounds like the way you did it was incredibly smart, and I'm sure guided by your physicians. And because that weaning process can be challenging, especially with some of the medications that are classed as antipsychotics. They can often have severe withdrawal symptoms, and so the last thing you want to do is try to go cold turkey off Abilify or Seroquel before you have, other treatments in place that are going to support you in that process.
I'll just say a few more things about that. One of the things that happened through the course of the 5 years when Matt was struggling was, an antipsychotic wouldn't be working, so we try something else, or it'd have terrible side effects. We try something else. And our experience was that psychiatrists would go way too fast on that taper. Sometimes it would just be switch from one to the other. And he would have, debilitating side effects. To call them side effects, they were effects of the drug. There's something called dopamine supersensitivity psychosis. Antipsychotic withdrawal can trigger psychosis. And yet the psychiatrist will almost never tell you that that's what's happening. They will say, oh, this is a new feature of the illness. Well, I was watching very carefully, and I could tell you that those were not features of his illness. They came and went only during the period of switching from one antipsychotic to another, or going down too fast on an antipsychotic. So what Matt and his dad, my husband, ended up doing was developing very complex spreadsheet that would taper off by, tiny bit. And then, as Matt said, we got a compound pharmacy to make tiny doses, because every time we tried to go as fast as the psychiatrist told us to go, he would have side effects. And so even though, it's been 2.5 years, almost 3 years on the diet, this taper has been very systematic and strategic and slow. And there's no reason to go fast. Although I would say he did get off lithium like really fast, with no side effects, which, with bipolar, you're told you're going to be on lithium for the rest of your life. Well, he's not. And there has been no issue with that at all.
So when you think about ketogenic therapy as a medicine, essentially, how difficult is it to remain in compliance with a medication regimen that essentially impacts every morsel of food that you eat each day?
This is a question a lot of people have, the compliance issue. One of the answers I give frequently is that you would be surprised the extent to which people who have this illness are willing to modify their lifestyles, just because of the suffering that, the illness entails. And we do a podcast and we talk to people who've recovered from bipolar disorder using the ketogenic diet. And I've talked to dozens and dozens of people who are strict adherents to the diet. I think it's a super viable option for children and adolescents who have the illness. I've talked to mothers and fathers who are able to take the food, take charge, keep the child in ketosis, and the child heals. But it is a strict diet, and there's some element of fear of missing out. And I think for me, because I don't drink alcohol or do drugs or smoke cigarettes or anything like that either, that was aggrandized when I started the diet. But the rewards have been so amazing. It's like, whatever, it's not a big deal. I don't even notice it anymore. And there's also something awesome about eating well. So I'll say that.
We have a question here from someone asking if you happen to have had any sort of co-occurring diagnoses. A lot of kids we see, they come in with diagnoses of DMDD plus generalized anxiety disorder plus ADHD. There's a lot of sort of alphabet soup, so to speak, of diagnosing. And we have a question here about whether or not you had any co-occurring diagnoses that were also addressed by keto, or through the fact of using it, able to help determine that maybe you didn't have those co-occurring disorders.
I had some low-grade anxiety in high school related to academic stress, or like moderate grade. I don't know, Mom, you can speak to that. Substance use issues for sure that I've handled. But yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I think a lot of these comorbidities, when you do implement the keto thing, they seem to fix themselves frequently. Mom, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Matt did not have any official diagnoses growing up. But like you said, there was anxiety in high school, panic attacks. Maybe you would have gotten a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder if we'd ever gone to a psychiatrist, which we never did. But it wasn't in the sense that it was really anything chronic or interfering with Matt's life. He always was an excellent student with great executive functioning and no ADHD type of issues. But the substance use disorder was a big one. And then I would say that we hear from all kinds of people who, especially anxiety, seems like the first thing to resolve on ketogenic therapy. ADHD symptoms for sure, focus, brain fog, irritability, anxiety, impulsivity, all those things we hear from people are getting better. And we actually, in our first bipolar research study with ketogenic diet that was performed at the University of Edinburgh, the first one to get published, they were tracking things like energy and impulsivity and anxiety, and all of those went in the right direction in a very short 6 to 8 week intervention.
Both of you have used a word that we don't hear very much in the field of mental health and psychiatry, which is recovered. We talk about recovery being an ongoing, lifelong process, managing chronic illnesses, but you've both used the word recovered. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that and sort of share with us why you feel that is the most accurate word to represent your experience.
I'll speak to that. I think we have this notion that mental illness is a lifelong thing. Your brain is dysfunctional. It's going to be that way forever. You're going to be prescribed medication for the rest of your life. My experience is that the keto diet, pumping the ketones up, cured me. I mean, I have no other way to explain. I went to Argentina for all of August. I worked remotely with a friend. I stayed up late. Of course, I didn't drink or do anything like that, but I had zero symptoms. I came back, got ready to work. I mean, I still track my sleep on my Oura ring here, but I don't have symptoms anymore, living totally normally. So these are the kind of recoveries that are possible with ketogenic diet that I talked to dozens of people. Like I said, this is not a case study. This is the answer. And the fact that we're not prescribing this diet to anyone, children, adolescents, adults, when they manifest psychiatric symptoms immediately as the go-to is criminal to me. I mean, it's really criminal. I have a soft spot for medications, especially olanzapine, as an anti-manic agent for acute situations, and I'm grateful for it. But as a long-term solution, man, those meds did not do it for me. They just did not do it.
Yeah, and I would say, if you Google remission recovery, the definition of remission and recovery is a lack of symptoms. So I don't know how else we can describe it. It is the definition, and that does not have symptoms. And I think it's very important to be clear about his experience for 5 years. This was a daily battle with symptoms. People have this idea of bipolar being, mania, then depression, then this lovely euthymia in the middle. Well, that was not Matt's experience. And I think the research would show that is not most people's experience with bipolar disorder. I mean, anxiety, irritability, impulsivity, sleep issues, brain fog. This is a very complex condition. And so to have a normal life without any of those struggles, to me, that's recovered. It's healed. His brain is healing. And we see that this intervention has been used for 100 years in epilepsy. There's an evidence base demonstrating it is the single most effective intervention for pediatric epilepsy, better than any drug. It's not offered as first-line treatment in pediatric epilepsy. It's only offered after someone has failed 2 medications. But many of those patients, especially younger patients who use ketogenic therapy for some number of years, can sometimes go off the diet and never have another seizure. I think that happens in some 30% or something of epilepsy patients. So the evidence suggests that there is healing going on in the brain. And we have one collaborator who talks about being misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder and actually having neurometabolic dysfunction that was healed by resolving the underlying metabolic dysfunction. And so, which is not to say, I think it's very important not to suggest that, say, if Matt went back to, eating a standard American diet, super high carbohydrates, drinking alcohol, using drugs, not managing his sleep, not exercising, not meditating, like things wouldn't go well. The human body responds to the inputs. And so he is exemplary in his habits, and that allows him to be in recovery. If all that went out the window, if any of us mistreat our bodies and our brains, they will respond accordingly. But that was never the message we got. It wasn't like, well, if you do everything right, you can recover. That was never really suggested, and it has been the case.
I find it fascinating when you bring up epilepsy, because the keto diet was used for so long prior to the introduction of modern psychiatric medications. Epilepsy was treated using ketogenic diet and was successful in many cases at curtailing seizures. And I know this is something that I'm going to be talking about with Dr. Scher next week when he joins us from Metabolic Mind to talk about some of the more details of the science behind this. But it's hard to miss the connection between epilepsy and bipolar when these standard mood stabilizers that are used to treat bipolar disorder are actually medications that were initially developed to be anti-seizure medications. So obviously there's a connection here, and being able to have all of the evidence to suggest that it can support seizure reduction, it seems intuitive to accept the idea that it may also be have a key role to play in reducing bipolar disorder symptoms.
And we actually now have neuroimaging results that show us what happens in the brain that's consuming glucose versus ketones. There was an experiment that one of our collaborators did a few years back. It wasn't in bipolar disorder. She's now going to repeat that experiment with bipolar patients. That actually shows that ketones stabilize brain networks. So if you think about epilepsy and bipolar disorder, there's a destabilization of brain networks that is resolved in ketotic conditions that are not resolved when glucose is the primary fuel. Right. So it's kind of cool to be able to see it in the brain with imaging.
So there's just one quick question that I wanted to answer for everyone. There's some questions here about next week's event. Next week, I'm going to be in conversation with Dr. Brett Scher. He is the director of Metabolic Mind, which is the organization that Jan co-founded. And its focus is on studying metabolic therapies in terms of treatment for mental health conditions. I hope I summarized that accurately. And so he's going to be with us next week to talk more details about the science behind ketogenics. So if you're interested in that, please join us again next week for that on Wednesday, the 25th. You can get a link to register to that from our website, cmhrc.org. Both of you have mentioned sort of lifestyle interventions, not just how you eat, but sleeping, meditating, exercising. Are there particular kinds of exercise, particular kinds of meditation that you would recommend that people explore and learn more about as they're trying to treat these disorders with non-pharmacological interventions?
Sure. So I kind of compartmentalized it into 6 broad categories of wellness that I have to nail, which are circadian rhythm management, which includes sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, purpose, and connection. And let me just first say that without keto, without the diet, I think I could do all the other 5 very, very well, and I wouldn't be here. I would be sick. So keto is essential. The exercise question, I lift weights pretty much every day. I love to lift weights, and I Peloton or run almost every day for 20 to 30 minutes of intense aerobic exercise. And that's a great way to bump the ketones up. I've just noticed through trial and error that if, like, after I do some sort of hard cardio, swimming, running, cycling, Peloton, whatever it is, my ketones get shot way up. And then the circadian rhythm management element, which is crucial. And the reason I say that is because for me, it is more than sleep. It's about darkness before bed, get the melatonin production going, not eat three or so hours before bed, wear blue light blockers to prepare myself for sleep, and then wake up at a consistent time every day, 7 days a week, and get some light exposure first thing in the morning. And those are all parts of the circadian rhythm thing. And then, of course, there's the keto. But again, I want to stress that I was doing a lot of this before I went on keto and I was not well. So, keto was the missing link. But I think when done in tandem with all 6 of these done well, like life can be amazing, man. I've just found I've shot past my peers even who are like supposed to be well, but they're all anxious these days. I don't know, but hard cardio is the answer.
Matt, when I'm hearing you talk about this, I always think of good treatment as being like a jigsaw puzzle, and you have to have all of the different pieces in place, and you can have 5 of the 6, but if you're missing that 6th, it's not going to be finished and be a picture and come into focus. Those 6 things you outlined, that's beautiful, and what a great succinct way to help people sort of keep track of what it is they need to be paying attention to keep themselves healthy, mind, body, and spirit. Thank you for sharing.
One
Sure
thing
thing.
I've heard
Go,
Matt
Mom.
talk about, which maybe you could share, Matt, is that I think, especially in depressive episodes, the advice to get out and get some exercise can be literally impossible. So Matt, I wonder if you could just share about that.
Yeah, I think keto has to come first. I mean, when I started keto and I recovered a little bit, enough that I had enough energy in my body to go out and move and get some sunlight. And, bipolar disorder can feel like an energy imbalance when you're in those depressions. And it's not a psychological problem or problem of motivation that's preventing the person from going out and getting movement. It's actually an energy imbalance in the body that's a result of the metabolic dysfunction that comes from just stuffing yourself full of bread and Coca-Cola for however many years. So I encourage people to do the keto thing first. And I think for a lot of people, doing the keto and adhering to the diet can be easier than taking on some ridiculous exercise protocol. But then when you heal a little bit, then the exercise can come. For people who are really struggling, I would encourage them to try just getting outside a couple times a week, develop a goal that's very possible, like a 15-minute walk twice a week, and then do that consistently for a few weeks to train the muscle of adherence rather than trying to take on some crazy protocol and exercise and then failing. And then, we're back to square one and we haven't gone outside in 4 weeks. But yeah, I mean, I think people should do the keto first.
Matt, we have a question here. Someone is wondering if you can elaborate a little on what purpose and connection are, how you would define those in that list. And then I'd like to get into some details on how do you do this keto diet. But first,
Sure.
Purpose and connection.
I don't know. These are the ones that I've actually thought the least about because I formulated this hexagonal 6-part theory like a few days ago. But I'm very conscious about my relationships and trying to find the best bros. I got a couple really, really close dudes that I really trust a lot. And so, yeah, I wish I could give you a more articulate answer. As for the purpose one, I think nailing the health element and then sharing it with the world has been a purpose that I've had for the last couple of years that I would love to lean into if the opportunity presents itself, which it seems like it really is, because I'm like this kid. I'm the son of the parents who are donating all the money. So then people want to hear my opinion. I don't know. But yeah, those I'll get back to because those are the ones I'm working on. I think having something to live for outside myself has helped me a lot. And there's a lot of that in the substance abuse recovery community as well that I also lean into. What was the second question? Remind me.
Well, I will remind you, but first I'd like to say, if I may, that your advocacy and your speaking on this topic is really incredibly powerful, and I suspect very, very moving for parents of younger children, because as I said at the beginning, this disorder is very isolating for families to live with, especially when the child is 6, 7, 8 years old and struggling with these unbelievable symptoms that everyone else around them thinks they're doing on purpose. And one of the fears that I hear over and over and over again from parents is, what is going to happen to my child when they're an adult? What will they be like? Will they be able to function? Will they be able to care for themselves? And you are painting a vision of such hope and inspiration for people to see that this could be my child. My child could grow up to be as self-sufficient and creative and compassionate and introspective as Matt is. And it's within our reach, not because you have, some pie in the sky solution where everyone has to get on a rocket and go to Mars. You have something very practical and very straightforward that you can offer as, this worked for me, give it a try. And so that was my second question. What does it actually look like to do this? What does a day in the life of ketogenic therapy look like? How do you do it?
Yeah, so these days, we have the chef who preps all the keto food for me. We're really fortunate that we're able to do that. Having said that, if I didn't have the chef, I would cook my own food. It wouldn't be a problem. I would just meal prep on Sundays, wake up on a work day, slam a protein shake with some MCT oil, which is multi-chain triglycerides, which will bump the ketones. Go to work, go to the gym at lunch, sneak off to the gym, eat a lot of meats and high-fat foods, butter, olive oil, steak, salmon, olives, macadamia nuts, etc., all that good stuff in abundance. And a couple big meals in the afternoon, lift weights, big meal at 7, and then stop eating around 7:30. Wind down, calm, podcasts, books, get off those TikTok, all that nonsense, Instagram, and then blue light blockers, and then calm and get a good sleep. And that's really, it's not perfect, but I try to nail the big ones. And there's a thing called the Pareto principle, and what it advocates is that, or what it points to is that a lot, 80% of the recovery from something in this case can come from the 20% of the most essential actions. So I've tried to nail down, what are the most critical things that I just have to nail, and then really execute on those. And if everything isn't perfect, it's not perfect. The last thing I'll say is that I've drifted off the diet a little bit occasionally in the last couple of years, and I always seem to be fine. And I have this theory, Mom, you talked about how some children who have epilepsy can go on the diet for a few years and then they come off it and they don't have recurrence of the symptoms. I have this theory that the 9 months of hardcore ketosis that I was in 2021 when I started the diet could have cured my brain to the extent that I could go back to eating carbs right now if I wanted to, and my symptoms wouldn't reemerge. I don't want to test that theory, and I'm not going to. There's just no point for me. And I try to get myself in ketosis, checking the ketones at least a couple times a week. But you never know. But that's what it looks like. I mean, I just pig out on salmon and steak and chicken and eat butter. I used to eat shots of melted butter at restaurants and stuff like that. Eat the butter without the bread.
Well, and I should say, when Matt says cheating, he means eating a lot of those protein foods and maybe not checking to see if it's so much protein it might kick him out of ketosis. He's not eating. I mean, I don't think you've eaten a piece of bread or a bite of pasta or a cookie there's been no cheating.
No, it's been years since I've had any real carbs. Bread, ice cream, pasta, rice, I haven't had it in years, which sucks, but it's also liberating to it's really funny. And this is something I've read too, that the less optionality I have in those aspects of my life, that actually the more liberated I become when I never have to think about or devote mental energy to what I'm going to eat. Oh, just space clears up in my head for other things in my life. So it's worth it.
I think some people get a little nervous about their health when they hear words like steak and butter. And so I want to let everyone know that next week when Dr. Schur is with us, he is a cardiologist and a lipidologist, and he's going to be talking to us about all that aspect of it. And so he'll be able to answer your questions about the cardiovascular health impacts of doing ketosis or a ketogenic diet.
And we have a lot of resources on the website and on the YouTube channel, Metabolic Mind, of Brett talking about these things. So after you listen to him next week, you can go and listen to him a whole bunch more on the website and citing the evidence. That's comforting, like we had to make that choice, and it really helped me to actually read the evidence myself. And I was like, wow, we've been told saturated fat is bad for us, and the evidence really isn't there to support that. So he can talk all about that next week.
Yeah. Jan, there's a question here from someone earlier. You used a term to describe the psychosis that can be induced when switching medications. And she's asking what that term was that you used.
Yeah, so let me see if I can get this right. Antipsychotic induced dopamine supersensitivity psychosis. And actually,
psychotic. Let's say that again so we can write it down.
Antipsychotic induced dopamine supersensitivity psychosis. And actually, we're working with a researcher right now at McLean Hospital, which is the most preeminent psychiatric hospital, whose father is the one who wrote the paper about that I discovered at some point in our journey when Matt was having intrusive visuals, like things like glass and horrible things going through his head all of a sudden, out of the blue, antipsychotics. And I was like, there must be some connection here. And I found that paper, and it was been very helpful to us.
Mm-hmm. So one question I always ask for people who have had success in treatment is, what would you tell somebody? What do you wish you knew when you were starting out this journey, that you could share with someone who might be at that spot right now? Both of you, but we'll start with Matt.
Mom, will you go first?
Okay.
Sure. I mean, the first thing is, I wish I'd known about ketogenic therapy, because I think if we'd done that first, if we'd even done it in high school when Matt started to have anxiety, maybe none of this would have happened. So that's the first thing. Like food, what we eat, when we don't eat, what we don't eat, mitochondrial autophagy. I wish I'd known anything about any of that. But what I'll say generally as a parent, and I kind of intuitively held on to this, but it was sometimes tenuous, and that is, you know your child best. And just like you were saying earlier, Elizabeth, other people don't. Other people are going to say things about your child that are not correct. Your child is not doing this on purpose. Your child has a dysfunction or an illness that is creating these behaviors that are problematic. And a lot of times we were told by psychiatrists that Matt was euthymic. Well, he wasn't in a full-blown manic episode, and he maybe wasn't suicidally depressed, which that was not such a big issue for him, but it is for other people with bipolar disorder. But he was not himself. And it was on us to remember who that person was, and to cherish the memory of that person, and to not give up until we got him fully back, and now beyond, a more calm, more enlightened, more energetic and calm person than he ever was before. So I guess that's the thing that I would like to share with parents.
I'm going to go for a super granular response, which is be careful with drugs and alcohol, specifically marijuana and hallucinogenics. And the reason I say that is that I've talked to clinicians who have told me that they've had handfuls of young adults aged 18 to 22 coming in with psychosis from smoking marijuana. And what's happened these days with the marijuana, and I was a frequent marijuana user throughout all of these episodes, is that the psychoactive component of the drug, which is the THC, has been bred to outweigh the antipsychotic component, which is the CBD, I believe. And this is just, I do believe, not only based on my own experience, but people I've talked to, that this can put people over the edge, especially marijuana, especially LSD, especially mushrooms. So, I mean, there's that big one, and that was a struggle of mine for a long time, along with all of the other cliched stuff like don't give up. The other one maybe that's a little more controversial is, I think, do your own research. Seek multiple opinions from multiple different professionals who have different perspectives, because even though I think, professionals have the best intentions, sometimes different psychiatrists and different people are well-informed or more well-informed about different things. So it can be helpful to seek a diversity of perspectives. And Mom, you do a great job with that. So, we try to as well.
There's one last question that I think we would be remiss if we didn't touch on. We're just about out of our time, but I did want to bring this up because, Jan, I've heard you speak to this before. There's the observation that a diet like this is one that is costly. And how do we address this issue from the larger standpoint of socioeconomics and access to food, especially now with all of the impacts on our food system that are coming from climate change? How do we explain this and understand it in that context?
There's so many different ways to come at this question, so many important things to talk about. The first thing I'll say is that we do have resources out there that describe, especially on dietdoctor.com, describe how to do a ketogenic diet on a budget. It's totally doable. Literally, you can use eggs and inexpensive grocery store meat. We even had somebody do a program with only McDonald's. It was essentially taking the meat patties, removing the milkshakes, the French fries, the buns, and putting people into ketosis. So there are ways to make this affordable. And it's certainly more affordable to eat this way than to have to pay psychiatrists that, are out of network, and all the therapists and all the specialists and all the healthcare costs down the line. For society at large, if we all ate this way, we would eliminate our twin diabetes illness epidemics, which would save, like the GDP countries. So at a large scale, this is economically one of the most important things we need to do, as a culture, is to figure out how food can be medicine instead of poison.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We are just about out of time, and I want to honor the commitment that people made to be with us here tonight. I want everyone to know that this event is going to be sort of edited and tightened up, and then it will go on the CMHRC YouTube channel with links to CMHRC, with links to Metabolic Mind, and any resources that Jan or Matt or Dr. Schur next week offer to us will also be included there. We'll also be connecting to the Metabolic Mind YouTube site so that you can catch up on many of the wonderful videos that you have there. That said, I just wanted to read you one comment that was left here. It says, Jan and Matt, thank you so much for being here today. Jan, you embody the fierceness of mothers battling this illness on behalf of their children, and I'm so inspired by your fight. Matt, you are a living example of hope for those of us with younger children trying to hold on to a sense of optimism that they can live lives a relative normalcy. Thank you both for the path you are paving and the hope you offer those of us in the midst of this illness. Thank you. I absolutely 100% agree with all of that. There have been some questions about additional resources like support groups and the like. As I said, we will have all of that information up with the video on our YouTube channel and linking back to all of those resources that Metabolic Mind shares as well. And if there's something else that you really want to suggest, you let us know at CMHRC. We pride ourselves in providing bespoke care for families. And so if you need it, you let us know and we will figure out how to make it happen. So thank you so much to everyone for being with us. I do hope you join us next week for part 2 with Dr. Schur. It's going to be an incredible talk as well, really digging into the science and the protocols and how to of doing the ketogenic diet to treat mental health issues. So Matt, thank you for your time. Jan, thank you for your time. I look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for all the questions, guys. You guys are going crazy in the Q&A here. Just checking it out.
Great questions.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you again for joining us, being with us here tonight for this exciting conversation. For those of you who are looking for a certificate of completion, please email your request to programs@cmhrc.org and let us know whether or not you are a mental health provider, physical health care provider, or a family member. We have different certificates depending, so please let us know so we can get you the right one. Again, for those who might be interested in becoming members of CMHRC, you can get information from that from our website, on our membership options page. And again, it is our fundraiser, giving thanks. If you enjoy and appreciate these free webinars, please consider making a small donation to support our work. You can do that at www.cmhrc.org/donate. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank again Jan and Matt for being with us for this inspiring webinar on ketogenic therapy for mental health. Thank you, everyone, and good night.